Welcome back to another episode of Make Money Count. Remember, the goal of these videos is to dissect what is going on in the world and how that will affect us in Canada. More specifically, how it will affect our real estate market and your mortgage, whether you have one or you want to get one. Did something happen yesterday? Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. 47th President of the United States, I think. A question we could ask ourselves, is he going to go to try to become 48th after? I don't know. They say you can only be president for 2 terms, but is he going to make a comment that perhaps that should be 2 consecutive terms? Something to think about. I was thinking about it last night while I was watching the election unfold. How will Donald Trump being president affect your mortgage? Well, we already saw bond yields spike. In fact, bond yields have been spiking for the last 3 months. If we want to pull up a chart here, we can have a look at it. So last night, we saw them increase by, over this kind of more certainty that Donald Trump will be leading the United States and the free world. We saw 6 basis points increase, but we've already seen a pretty dramatic run up. So Canadian bond yields are pricing in where traders believe Canada's rate will be on average for the next 5 years, right? What the risk-free yield should be. That is going to be impacted, as we said in the past, by a whole bunch of different factors. Right now, what's impacting it is that the United States now has a leader in January that will come into power and has in no uncertain terms explained what he wants to do, right? He wants to cut government spending. He's tapped Elon Musk to be his Doge. So Elon Musk will be the head of Trump's Department of Government Efficiency. So we know Donald Trump wants to cut government spending. He wants to cut government. He will be focusing on increasing American productivity. He has said that his favorite word is tariffs. That should make us a little bit timid in Canada. It should scare us because 40% of the items that we produce are sold to the United States. And a tariff means that it will become more expensive for American companies to use Canadian products as inputs, and it will be more expensive for American purchasers to buy products that are originating from outside of the United States. And although that is essentially a tax on the United States, what it does is it forces people and companies in the United States to find alternatives to products that they have been purchasing outside of the United States. It brings productivity and production into the country. And if done properly by, complemented with tax cuts, and it's done in specific verticals of the economy, it can really work to grow that economy. Can also backfire. But the other thing to consider is that Trump's been handed a really full mandate, right? He hasn't just been elected president. He's got all levels of government now in his control. The people that were elected as governors and senators owe it to Trump that they were elected. And that's how they feel, which is going to allow Trump to push more and more of his agenda through. So you can expect more drilling for oil, more unlocking of natural resources, increased productivity. He's going to tighten up immigration, and he is going to tariff goods that come from outside the United States. Because of that, we have seen the U.S. Treasuries spike. So if you want to pull that one up for us, U.S. Treasuries are up. They've been going up over the last 3 months, but we saw them increase almost 20 basis points now. If you want to understand how huge that is, it's a change in how the market perceives growth in the United States. The Canadian bond yield, the increase is more a response to, oh man, can we really drop interest rates as much as we thought we could if the United States is firing on all cylinders? And I think we're going to have to. I think that unless we as a country can figure out how to play nice in the sandbox with the Americans and ensure that our industries don't get decimated by tariffs, we're going to have a problem. We already have a problem with productivity. In order for us to make a positive out of this, we are going to have to focus on our own domestic productivity. We've been saying it for a while now. Canada needs to start unlocking some of its resources. It needs to have its economy firing. I mean, what would have been really great is if we could have a Trump come in with a similar agenda right now and focus on increasing Canadian productivity. This is basically just like a huge reset for the United States, right? He is going to come in. He is going to upset a lot of people. He's going to get rid of a lot of people that are in entrenched positions. And he is going to focus the country on growth and productivity, which is what we need in Canada. We so desperately need a coherent movement forward to get our country firing again. There were some really cool things that I was reading about. One was Eric Schmidt, who used to run Google, not the two young guys, the one older guy with like the glasses and the white hair. And he was speaking, I think at Stanford, and he said that the biggest thing that will happen in the next decade will be artificial intelligence. And the scale of the growth and the amount of money that's going to get dumped into chips is going to be like nothing anyone expects. He said the one problem that the United States has is energy. And they're going to need energy or huge amounts of capital in order to be able to fuel this growth in AI. And he said the United States basically has two options. One option is they can go to the Middle East and they can tap on the Arabs to give them the capital that they need in order to build that infrastructure, or they can go to Canada. And he believes that strategically and economically, they're in a far better position to rely on Canada. The only reason why I bring this up is whenever a huge change like this happens, first it reminds me of that saying where change is opportunity. And then it reminds me of Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War. If you don't, I mean, everyone probably knows who Sun Tzu is, but he was a general and like a philosopher in, I don't know what dynasty, but maybe 600 years BC. So, almost 3,000 years ago. And he wrote a book called The Art of War. And in that book, there are these tenets of wisdom in how somebody should engage in battle. And some of those apply right now for Canada. It's really all centered around, anyone can know themselves. So whether it's a military general or a country or you doing a negotiation with, Bell or Rogers for a better cell phone deal. But literally, you can apply this to everything. So in this case, if we were to apply Sun Tzu's wisdom to the situation Canada finds itself in, I think that, we do know ourselves. I mean, it's always centered around enemy in The Art of War, but in our counterparty. And the better we can understand what the United States needs under this leadership, the better we can negotiate with them and prevent tariffs and come to an agreement where it is my hope that Canada can tie itself better to the United States and go on a huge lift for productivity. And I think that we can really accomplish that. And if that's the case, then we won't have to worry so much about bond yields, which are increasing because of fear that Canada can't keep interest rates low for fear that our dollar will continue to crumble against the United States dollar, which is happening right now, right? The fear, like whenever I speak to somebody about this who is closely monitoring bond yields and interest rates, their fear is, oh my God, how will Canada drop interest rates if the United States goes on a productivity tear and their yields are going up? How will we be able to decrease our yields in the face of this eroding Canadian dollar? And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think the way we got to look at this is, listen, if we give up as a country and we resign ourselves to not being able to become productive, then yeah, that's how we should think. We should think like, how can we go sit in the corner with our horrendous productivity and lack of an economy and do nothing other than respond to low interest rates and a weak Canadian dollar? But if we want to think positively about it, we should start thinking, how can we tie ourselves better to this productivity lift that's going to happen? How can we complement our neighbor? Like we got this big, gigantic juggernaut of a neighbor, which is going to start getting run more nimbly than it has been previously, which is going to start getting run by a guy who, trust me, all he wants to see is the S&P at all-time highs. By the way, the S&P is at all-time highs already, just in anticipation of this. In the first 100 days of him being in office, the first 3 months, you are going to see massive changes and a beeline for anything that he can do to increase productivity and get the stock market firing. Canada can go along for that ride, but we can't do it if we don't properly negotiate with our neighbor, if we don't identify their strengths and their weaknesses and understand how we can best complement them. So, I mean, unfortunately, Sun Tzu is no longer around, but maybe we should get Pierre Poilievre a book of Sun Tzu to help him with his negotiations. If we got one for Trudeau, I don't know if it would help. Maybe in the interim, but I don't know if that relationship's great. So all of this is to say, we're really just kind of digesting what Trump means for Canada. It definitely means you need a variable rate mortgage because fixed rates are going to stay artificially elevated. What you have to understand is those fixed rates for 5-year money in Canada, for those 5-year fixed rate mortgages, those rates are priced off of bond yields. And priced into bond yields right now is a fear that Canada can't really drop interest rates because if they do, the Canadian dollar will weaken too much. But if the economy is performing as poorly as it is right now, interest rates have to fall. We will see another 50 basis points in December. The Bank of Canada released their notes from their last meeting and everybody was aligned in decreasing 50 basis points in October. So I really believe we're going to see another 50 basis points in December. We're going to reach this really accommodating monetary policy. The next step is to find a way to better complement our neighbor, to bring up our own productivity growth in the face of some real macroeconomic headwinds. We've decreased immigration and we're going into a really, really slow housing market. Hopefully that starts picking up a little bit. And now we're going to be dealing with tariffs from our biggest trading partner. We're going to have to find ways to unlock productivity. And if we can do that, then I hope that there's a point next year where I say it's time to lock into a 5-year fixed rate. Because if that's the case, it means that we've dropped interest rates enough. We've complemented monetary policy with policy that actually helped us increase productivity. And we see a trajectory to higher interest rates because of accelerated growth. I listened to David Rubenstein. This is the last thing that I'm going to say, and then you can, but stick with me. I listened to David Rubenstein, who's the head of the Carlyle Group in the United States, talking about what the Trump win meant for the United States. All of a sudden in that conversation, they brought up the problem of the deficits, right? The United States has a huge deficit. They're printing a whole bunch of money. And he said, listen, there's not really much anybody can do about decreasing government spending because the 3 biggest expenses in the American economy for the American government are interest, entitlements, and defense. And you can't really cut those 3 things. And in fact, Trump's probably going to spend more on defense. But what you can do is you can impact growth. You can impact productivity. And there, the commentator on CNBC said, do you think it's reasonable for a Trump administration to bring in a period of 3% growth in the United States? Keep in mind, China has a 5% growth target, which they're not hitting, which we spoke about in the past. But could the United States come to expect a 3% growth rate over the next 4 years? And David Rubenstein said, I think we can probably even look at 3.5% as a possible growth rate. When you grow at 3.5%, you don't have to worry about deficits because the government starts collecting more because the economy is growing. That's the whole idea of a smaller government, reduce taxes, make the ground fertile for business investment and capital expenditure, and watch your country grow. We have been doing the opposite here in Canada for the last decade, and it's time for us to start thinking in a similar way. I don't care which side you lean, and I, honestly, like some of the things Trump says and his policies and some of the politics, like they don't just annoy you, they annoy everybody. But this is what we need to deal with. And our priority needs to be the success of our country. And we can't just get up on a high horse and say, we're not going to drill for oil. We're not going to go for our resources. We're not going to go to talk to Trump because he's mean, because that will lead us into a path of forever easing monetary policy. Well, we'll sit with zero interest rates and a Canadian dollar that's worth zilch, and you're never going to be able to go to the States again unless you're a billionaire. Make money count. Let's do it. We can do this. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like and subscribe or not. Anyways, thank you very much.